after or when Chris comes on. Oh, well, I guess not. Okay. Is it going on? Are you ready?
Ready for you.
Ready,
Take
ready.
it away.
All right.
Camera action.
Hi guys. So sorry for the delay. We had a bit of technical difficulties. We'll just blame Megan for that. It's fine. Welcome, welcome. You can have the next slide. I'm going to go through this pretty quickly, you guys, so we can get Chris in here. Here's our board members. You know, there's myself, Megan's here, Chris is here, Paul is here. Scott and Marcy couldn't attend tonight, but there's our current board members. Next, if you have questions, you need to contact us. You know, you can always go to you can email our info account or go to our website at agilendy.org. Please join us on our social media. I don't know if everybody's gotten to our YouTube channel yet, but if you do, go subscribe. We will post Chris's after tonight. It usually give us like a day or two turnaround and we'll have the videos up. Follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. Oh, if you want to be a speaker, you're interested, please feel free to send us a message so that we know, and any kind of topic that you're interested in speaking about, let us know. That would be great. Oh, next month is John Jorgensen. We're excited about him. Be sure to register for that now if you haven't already. I believe the event is already up and available online on our website. Could you please, when you came in, if you had a username, can you put your real name so we can keep attendance, you know, things for like PDUs and things like that. So if you don't have your first and your last name, if you could rename yourself, we would really appreciate it. And I'll go through this. I don't need to introduce them. Everybody knows we're super happy. Chris Shinkle is here, and I will step back. And Chris, thank you so much for coming. I'm so sorry for the issues that we had. And
yep, no, not a problem. Happy to be here. Yeah, we'll try to make this work best we can. So a lot of times in these virtual events, I don't use many slides, if any at all, and do a lot of drawing to make it sort of interactive. And we were having some trouble getting my iPad to connect. So with that being said, tonight we're going to talk a little bit about the messy middle. This is a problem I've seen come up quite a few times in the last year, and something that I think most of our clients sort of find themselves dealing with. So quick, first, a little story. When I was a teenager, my parents allowed me to go on a 7 day, 6 night high adventure canoe trip with just a bunch of other teenagers and a couple adults. I don't know why my parents let me do that. I don't think I would ever let my kid do that, but they did. And this picture here was sort of kind of like what the brochure looked like. It was serene and peaceful and awesome. And the first day on the water was very much like that. This was every day after that. The first night they had torrential downpours up in through Canada along the border where we were at, and the little streams we were supposed to be in and the tranquil lakes turned into massive floodwaters, and we were already on the way, and sort of like had no other option but to continue to go forward. And I learned one really sort of important thing that's critical in the situation. We needed really 2 things. One was a compass. We had to have some sense which direction true north was, and we needed a map. And the reason I'm telling you this story is what I have found a lot of times with our customers. The businesses will set sort of these high-level organizational goals. They'll describe these big business plans that are captured in PowerPoints and presentations and slide. They have a true north. They have some idea of where they're going. They have lots of people willing to build product, write software to head and get there. Lots of them trained with Agile. What they lack is the map. to connect the two. And my goal tonight, hopefully, is to give you a little of the map that we've been using with our customers this last year. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of sort of a product thinking framework that we find to be really helpful, and to walk through how we use that to sort of navigate this, what I call the messy middle, this place that lives between these high level business goals and objectives and the detailed delivery teams who are executing agile and working in sprints. We'll talk a little bit about how some teams operate in this model, what you can look for, and some common pitfalls that I see. And if you don't know, I work for a company called SEP, located in Carmel, and it's our building, at least for a little while. I don't typically talk about SEP, but I bring it up because I think it's important here. We are a product design and development company. Our clients hire us to help them build products and get products to market. And oftentimes what that means is they've identified a problem they think is worth solving. They probably have some idea about a solution. They have defined some business case. They have put something together to say, here's what we're hoping to do, and how we're going about doing it. And they've probably made some promises internal to stakeholders that said, we're going to build this great thing. It's going to generate $4.5 million in incremental revenue. We're going to be awesome. We just got to get going and get there. And that's oftentimes they walk in our doors and are ready to hire a team, ready to get going. And we have to help them sort of navigate this space between where they're at today with this sort of high level objective or goal or true north in mind, and what the delivery teams need in order to function at their best and sort of make progress. So I'm going to switch over. Hopefully this works. Okay, I'm assuming you can still see my screen or a different screen. Okay, great. We use Miro a lot. I've never done this in Miro. I typically draw on my iPad. Yeah, so here we go, wild ride. Let me start by drawing this framework. In the middle here, this is sort of the world, and a lot of our customers or folks have products that exist in this world today, and they have customers using it, and some customers are really happy, and some customers not so much, and some are pretty frustrated. And right, so what do we do about that? So in this model, there are sort of 4 general quadrants, and I'm going to start over here in the 4th quadrant that we're probably all most familiar with, and we'll call it delivery. So delivery starts up here with a product backlog, or most of the time actually sort of a release backlog that they're working from. And then agile teams sort of work in these big sprints, these iterative sprints, to ultimately deliver something back into the world. And you know what? I need to zoom out so you guys can see that. There we go. Not sure why that's not zooming. Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, so delivery team working in sprints to ultimately deliver something back into the marketplace. And occasionally they might deliver some incremental releases and do some testing and validation, but for the most part, they're working in these sprints to deliver something back into the market. And so I'm going to be switching back and forth between some slides. That's a super critical thing. This is a quote from a MIT Sloan management review, and it was looking at teams and sort of what it required to be high performing teams. And you can see sort of here at the punchline, the researchers concluded that in order to achieve high performing performance, companies that rely on software should focus first and foremost on these 3 things: their ability to execute, to build reliable systems, and work continually to reduce complexity. And only then will pursuing alignment with the business priorities sort of pay off. So I show that because if we can't do this agile thing, if we can't deliver reliably, if we can't execute these sprints and deliver something into the market, none of this else really matters. And agile helps us, does a really great job of this. And I'm going to assume you are really good and skilled, and you've got that down. So with that being said, let's talk about the next quadrant. In this quadrant, we call sense. Sometimes we'll call learn. This is really, after I have a product in the market, how do I learn and get new ideas? Where do I learn and where do ideas come from? And for us, they come really, I think, in three ways. One, from your existing customers. They help from looking at technology trends and then market trends. And sort of this combination of these three things ends up producing ideas that the organization then can sort of look at and prioritize as potential opportunities in the market. Those ideas sort of feed into a decision-making process that includes the ideas of sort of the business, the company. And typically that's like sort of some vision or strategy that the business is working through to decide what to go work on, what to go build next, or where to go. And these ideas tend to go through, I'll say, this sort of three-stage prioritization process. Let me come over here, make some new room. There we go. So sort of three different overlapping concerns that I think we have to consider when we're prioritizing them. One is this thing that we're talking about going doable? Do we have the right skills? Do we have the right people, the money, the time to pursue this new idea? Second, is it valuable? Is it not only valuable to the business, but is it viable to the users? Does it further the strategy? And then the third thing, which is super important, and I don't think this often gets included. A lot of times I'll see people graph sort of valuable versus usable. The third thing is sort of perishable. Or time sensitive. So what I mean by that is, if we don't pursue this thing now, does the opportunity go away, right? To prioritize and decide to do one thing is, in essence, deciding not to do something else. And so need to understand and think through these things. It has to be something we can achieve and do, the people, finances, technical resources, things that we have in our organization. It has to be valuable to the organization and as well as the consumers. And it needs to, if it's time sensitive or perishable, we need to sort of consider that. Sorry, I'm drawing my iPad and then moving the screen that you're looking at on my computer, and it's like patting my head and rubbing your belly at the same time. You know me very well. I'm not good at doing more than one thing. So anyway, we have these ideas coming in that we've got from the market or the world, right? And in today's day and age, there's all these analytics platforms that we can garner these ideas from and research to help feed into these different ideas. We bounce those up against the vision and strategy of the organization. We go through some sort of prioritization phase, and then generally, at least what I see comes out of this is something what I'll call an opportunity backlog. Here are all the things as an organization we can pursue, go and do. And those opportunities oftentimes get translated into some sort of business model. We'll often use a business model canvas or an opportunity canvas, but some way to do this. And in the model, companies generally have talked about, you know, what problem they're solving, ideas around solutions, cost and ROI. They've sort of made their way and talked through a variety of these different things. And now they think they're ready to sort of enter into this sort of third and final quadrant, which we'll call discovery. Also sort of, I refer to as sort of the messy middle. This is the, how do I connect this high level business objective, this high level business model, this thing that is, you know, that is really concerning with this backlog that, you know, ultimately gets turned into sprint backlogs so we can go execute. And that I find is where most companies sort of fall down. They think it's like a direct line, do not pass go, do not collect 200. To do that it's enough, and oftentimes that's not enough. And so quadrant 3, this discovery quadrant, is really focusing on driving down risk. This is really about, at this point, becomes sort of a risk-based decision and thinking, and navigating that then is sort of what our challenge is. So oftentimes I'll show this. This is what it feels like, I think, to be involved in sort of this discovery and messy middle. Right, there's some opportunity we want to go tackle or capture. We're doing this discovery. Hopefully we validate that idea and it's good, and then we build to scale. Agile tends to deal with this part on the right here, this execution part. That's what I would label sort of as quadrant 4, delivery. Agile tends to focus a lot here. It doesn't focus a whole lot here on this upfront piece that we're trying to figure out, and that's sort of what we're going to talk about today. What we want to do is drive down the uncertainty and risk before we ramp up the investment. And delivery teams building product at scale is time consuming and expensive. And so what we would like to do is think about, how do we reduce this risk? How do we drop this risk down as best we can before making that sort of sizable investment? And so this is sort of how we like to think about sort of navigating this area. It starts first with a framing. We want to make sure we frame the opportunity. It's clear, everybody's on the same page, has the same shared understanding of sort of what we're trying to tackle. The second thing we want to do is identify and map out our assumptions. Our ability to identify, talk about, and test these assumptions ends up proving critical if we really want to drive down sort of the risk. Then it sort of, at this point, becomes a risk-based decision. If we think we've reduced, there's nothing that's that scary, that there's not a lot of risk, then, you know, we can take it and drop it straight over here into the release backlog. Coincidentally, sometimes there's too much risk, and, you know, it moves up here to just sort of like the kill pile. Most times, though, there's some level of risk. There's something that we need to focus on and sort of drive down before we feel comfortable doing that. So we're going to try to identify and take our riskiest assumption. We're going to talk about how do we identify that. And then we're going to go through this sort of build, right? We're going to deliver it hopefully back into the world to measure and then capture these learnings. And then back into this risk-based decision. And now we want to reevaluate, is the risk materially low enough that we feel comfortable moving forward? Or do we need to do more testing and experimenting before we're ready to move on? And that's sort of the process that we're going to continue to go through until we have changed the risk profile enough that we feel comfortable starting to build at scale. So if I zoom out here, there's this discovery piece, what we call this, or the messy middle. Sometimes we'll refer this as build to learn versus down here in delivery, build to earn. And so what we want to do is we want to balance those. We want to make sure that if it's risky, if there's uncertainty in it, that we're driving that down in the build to learn cycle, not the build to earn and building at scale. One of the telltale signs of this happening, of sort of mixing these two up and not recognizing that there's uniquely two types of work. There are two types of things as a team we need to sort of focus on from either a learning perspective or earning perspective. Is when you drop stuff into a sprint and things get started and it stops, it gets paused, it doesn't finish. And so it sits there because we don't know the information, we don't have the right details, we're waiting on something else, but it gets started and it quickly stopped. And we start to every sprint, there's a bunch of things that don't finish because we didn't quite understand something well, or the requirements weren't defined well enough, or the acceptance criteria wasn't clear enough. And so we stop and we have to figure that out, and our predictability goes way down. The time it takes, our cycle time goes way up. And so that's a real good sign that there were things we probably need to investigate and learn or uncover before we drop them into the build to earn cycle. And that's what we want to do. So for the rest of the talk, I want to talk a little bit more in detail about how do we do these things in here, starting with the framing. The first thing when we start to do this framing, I think there's a really important question to ask. And the question really is, are we in an explore mindset or are we in an exploit mindset as we consider the business model? So what does that mean, right? That's what you're asking. What is that about? Let me switch back over to here. So this comes from Barry O'Reilly in the Lean Enterprise, and basically sort of creates this continuum that sort of defines these two extremes. On the explore side, we're looking for new business models. We're innovating. We're driving and uncovering new things. Our tolerance for experimentation and risk is really high. Our biggest risk is to not realize sort of a product market fit. Versus the other side on this exploit side, where we are extending an existing business model. We're optimizing an existing product. We're adding on. Maybe we're building out features. It's more of an incremental improvement mindset and optimization. From a risk perspective, there's a lot of complex trade-offs that get made here, where we're spending money and new features versus fixing something that needs to get fixed or looked at. The goal is really about efficiency and maximizing yield of the captured market, as opposed to discovering sort of new opportunities in markets. And sort of measures of success end up being typical measures of success, things like ROI. People talk about velocity and throughput. It's really about how fast and how much you're building and getting done, and how much that is conforming to the plan. Versus the explore side, which is much broader. We've taken this step further and sort of identified some other areas we think this fits. That's a good telltale sign. One of them I like to talk about is what's likely to happen after a demo. So you do a sprint, you do a product demo. Is it just a status reporting mechanism? If so, you're probably more on the exploit side. Is it, no, we learned something new and we're fundamentally changing the direction the product's moving in, or we're fundamentally changing where we're going? Probably more on the explore side. But understanding where you're at, whether you're more in the explore or exploit mindset, is key to moving it forward. If, for instance, your UX staff is more on the explore side and your development staff is more on the exploit side, or your product is more on the exploit, that's going to create some friction that's just not going to allow the team to perform at its best. A guy named David Bennett, who was really big in the lean startup community around innovation accounting, says, you are where you're being measured. So regardless of where you're at on this continuum, ultimately, you are where your company's measuring you. And if they're measuring things like burn downs and velocity and throughput and, essentially ROI, short-term returns, you are on the exploit side, regardless if they're asking you to explore and identify a new business model. And I find those two ideas sort of in conflict, create a lot of tension in organizations because they're not clear about where they are. And the models and the metrics are fundamentally different between the two. In the Explore, we're making an investment. We are focusing on learning and uncovering new things. It's less about shipping product. In the Exploit, though, it's all about shipping product. It's all about sales, monthly recurring revenue, capturing new customers, and in that we need to take on a different posture or different mindset. And so for this discovery phase, this piece where you're trying to navigate the messy middle, I think it's really key that we understand which mode you're operating in. Are you in an explore mode or an exploit mode? Once I've done that and I've sort of framed it and I have my business model canvas over here, or my opportunity canvas, now I can start to talk about identifying and mapping these assumptions. And I think one of the great ways to think through what assumptions we're making from a risk perspective is to consider these four categories of risk: desirability risk, which is really around the market and the customers; feasibility risk, which is more focused on our ability to deliver and maintain what this opportunity; viability risk, which is, can we make money off this? Does it cost more to build than what the returns are going to be? And finally, sort of adaptability risk. What else is going on in the environment? What other competition is coming into the environment? What industry or regulatory bodies may be changing things that's putting pressure on the business model and your ability to sustain it? And so I will oftentimes use this with customers to sort of walk through each of these independently to talk about what assumptions are we making around who wants this and why do they want it? What assumptions are we making around our ability to build it? What assumptions are we making around the viability of it? What we believe will make money on it and how soon, and sort of the adaptability piece. And so one of the tools that that I will often use in that model is something that comes from a guy named David Bland, and he calls it assumption mapping. And so sort of a 2x2 quadrant. On the y-axis is, sort of how important is it? The more important it is, the higher up it is, the less important down on the bottom. And then the x-axis is evidence. How strong is our evidence? If it's strong evidence, we find it over. I'm sorry, that's not what I meant to say. Weak evidence is on the right, and strong evidence is on the left. So what type of evidence do we have for or around this assumption we're making? And this is how I sort of like to think about that. Weak evidence is sort of just opinions or beliefs. It's based on what people say. It's based on sort of, internal tests or prototypes, and generally small investments. Strong evidence comes when we start to look at facts, events, hard data. It's based on what people do. It's tested and validated in real world settings, typically involve larger investments to test those higher pieces, those pieces of evidence. So we like to take our assumptions and put them on sticky notes and sort of map where they fall sort of in this quadrant. And then the ones that we want to focus on most are these up here. The assumptions that we think are really important for the success of this business model, and we lack evidence. So Don Reinertson talks about this sort of discovery quadrant. He'll oftentimes refer to this, as driving down risk or buying information. We want to buy information that helps us understand if this is if we're placing a good bet or we're placing a bad bet. Recent tweet of his, actually February 16th, he was talking about this and said, look, if the primary purpose of a feature is to test a hypothesis of value, then the quality simply has to be good enough to generate a meaningful signal, right? You don't need the customer to say it's perfect or I'd die to have it today. Just that they're interested in it oftentimes is enough. And testing more than that, doing more than is necessary to show a strong signal or to generate a strong signal ends up being waste. And that's what we're trying to avoid. We want to make sure that our experiments and the things we're doing match the investments we're making. And so sometimes I'll draw this for customers. So if on this x-axis is our investment, what are we willing to spend? Up here, this is slow and expensive. And on this side, we're talking fast and cheap. And then the y-axis is our evidence. How strong is our evidence for something? So, if we would like to sort of create this sort of like proportional sort of thing, so that if we're building down here and we're building something fast and cheap, I'm generating a little bit of evidence. And as I get a little more evidence, I build something a little more expensive and a little more expensive and a little more. But as I move up testing and validating these ideas, the amount I'm willing to invest to gain better evidence increases. What we don't want to do is be down here where we're not generating much evidence or high quality evidence, and we're investing a whole lot of money. Or up here, we think we need a lot of evidence, and we're only making a small investment. That's not going to produce the kind of evidence we need. My friend Jeff Patton, when he sort of draws this, he calls these two extremes the stupid zone. In one place, you're wasting time, and in another place, we're wasting money. So we want to avoid the stupid zone. We want to try to make sure the investment we're making matches our confidence level in what we're trying to do. So I go back. We want to make sure we frame the opportunity. Are we explore or exploit mindset? We want to identify our assumptions and map those assumptions. We're gonna try to think about those assumptions and from a risk perspective, and we're going to look at the assumptions across the desirability, feasibility, viability, adaptability, sort of quadrants of risk, to figure out where we need to go test and learn. And I think by far the best source of information out there for this concept comes from this guy, David Bland. And it's a book called Testing Business Ideas. It's part of the Strategizer series. David actually just, I believe in February, you probably can find the tweet, has offered we'll do a book club with your company with him on this book if you want. So call him up or DM him on Twitter. And I know he set up some book clubs where he's actually reading the book over a series of 5 weeks with companies. It's a great book with lots of information. One of the things in the book is this table. I recreated it here, but he defines all of these different types of experiments or tests that you could do. And he has it broken out in terms of discovery versus validation, bunches of different types. And then he compares the relative cost, setup time, runtime, and evidence strength. And you can see on the far right, he even says, which themes are we testing? So if I need to test desirability and feasibility, which things can I look at to test those? I think it's a great resource when you start talking about testing and executing tests, and you're trying to decide how much to invest and how long it takes and what's out there. lots of great examples and then details in the book about how to execute each of these. There's actually a picture from the book. And he even says, like, okay, if you're in a B2B hardware or B2B software or, B2C software, depending on the vertical and where you're in, here's likely a set of tests or a path for validating and testing sort of feasibility, desirability, and viability. So it's a great resource that helps you sort of navigate this space of testing. And I have found it to be super helpful when working with our customers. The other two things I use from David that I have found to be super helpful is these ideas. He has a test card and a learning card. And the test card just is a really simple way to quantify what it is we're trying to test. We believe that, and we put in there, and how critical is that to sort of our business model. To verify it, this is what we're going to do. We're going to measure this, and we're going to know if we're right with this. Daniel Kahneman, Nobel Prize winner, said that learning happens between what we expect to happen and what actually happened. And so talking about what we think is going to happen if we're right is really critical. We can create a lot of these test cards. We can move them through a Kanban board and execute a variety of tests, again, trying to drive that risk down. After we execute a test, we make sure we capture the results in a learning card. Here's what we believe. This is what we observed. From that, these are the things we learned, and here's what we're going to do next. It could be, move it into the release backlog and start to build it out. It could be that we need to do some more testing to continue to validate those ideas. And so we want to keep going through this process, keep testing these ideas and until the risk is essentially low enough that we're ready to move into discovery. Now, with our customers, there's oftentimes a sort of a common set of I'll say of categories that we'll navigate through to sort of test all these things. And so I think you can just simply use it as like a checklist of things to look at. So first thing a lot of times I'll talk about is sort of what's the business strategy or the business opportunity. And this is where a lot of times we'll frame that with a business model canvas or opportunity canvas. But we typically use some canvas to sort of figure it out. The next thing, start to look at the customer and the customer segments. Specifically, what are the jobs of the customer? What are the pains, opportunities, needs, wants that the customers have? And here, a lot of times we're using sort of the jobs to be done kind of framework and philosophy. And also this thing called an opportunity solution tree, which comes from a lady named Teresa Torres. And if you search for opportunity solution tree, I think the first link that comes up is hers that says, why is the opportunity solution tree changing the way we work? Another area that we'll look at then is sort of talk about the products and services, or maybe more specifically, what are the features we could go build for this app? And I want to map those features. I want those features to sort of map to the pains and needs and wants and jobs. And if we're identifying features that don't map to one of those things, I think it's a great to sort of ask, well, why? What are we doing? To help identify those, I'll use a story map to sort of help me drive out those needs and concerns. After we go through those, I will start to look at the business model itself. And there we're really starting to look at what is our investment and our return on that investment, our ROI. We also start to look at and start talking about the competition and what's in the marketplace. For here, it's looking at some sort of competition analysis, framework of sorts. And for up here, typically we're doing some sort of forecasting, some sort of Monte Carlo forecasting to help understand some of the cost and returns there. Finally, I'd like to talk about sort of the go-to market sort of strategy. And this, I think, often gets overlooked, but it's sort of critical. Sometimes I'll refer this to as the get, keep, grow strategy. How do we get customers? How do we intend to keep those customers? And how do we end up growing those customers? And so there's some key tools and things we look at here. A lot of great resources out there that talk about onboarding. So here we want to look at onboarding. A lot of times there's some conversations around behavioral design, and sort of some of those elements we want to make sure we build in. The hooked model from BJ Fogg is a great resource to sort of look at. We'll touch on sort of the pirate metrics, kind of look at each of those to help sort of inform this idea. And then, lots of us will look at sort of some different engagement models. There's some great ones out there and some great resources. I think Amplitude, a company who does analytic stuff, has a lot of great resources around building some different engagement models. So, kind of we'll look at sort of this collection of spaces and tools to walk through it, all looking at with a lens of sort of the risk, and specifically those 4 categories of risk, to help us inform what and where we're trying to go. Now, I drew this and talked about it very much like it was, we do all this discovery, and then we do this delivery. But that often is not the way it looks like. If I were to draw a line out here to the left, and I labeled this up here sort of discovery, and this down here delivery. This is a model where we start to talk about dual track agile. In dual track, so you've got these things going on at the same time. Down here in delivery, I'm executing in my 2-week sprints or whatever it is. But up here in discovery, I'm exploring. There's lots of things going on. Sometimes multiple experiments and tests going on at the same time. And I'm delivering, and hopefully these things then are informing some of our delivery sprints. And when I see teams work this way, there's a couple of different models that I've seen them use that tend to sort of work well. Specifically, there's like three models that I have seen sort of popularized. The first looks something like this. You've got products and UX up here, you've got dev down here, and you've got products and UX sort of working in these sprints, and you've got dev working in these sprints, right? This up here, they'll call discovery, and this down here, they'll call delivery. And these are delivering into here every time. Of all the 3 I'll show you, this is absolutely the worst. I would not ever recommend this to anybody. I think this creates lots of problems. So that's a big no. The second model looks like this. Just says discovery and delivery. Notice that they're not specifying the resources that are doing it. And you've got discovery going on, and you've got delivery going on all the time. And there, of course, is some sort of communication between those, and even going both ways as they're working. Same teams working back and forth between the two. And then the third model, which I find interesting, I've used both B and C. In the third model, you have discovery and you have delivery, and you're sort of kind of almost like moving in between these. It's the same team that is oscillating. So the team is doing discovery, and then the team is doing delivery, and then they're back doing discovery, and they're doing delivery. I think the this one works great for small teams, startups. If you're more in the explore mindset, I think it can work well. This, I think, tends to work better for larger teams, enterprise, where there's a lot more specialty and resources and stuff. If you're building a physical product that has electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, software, right? There's just a lot. It's harder to get everybody to move. I think it can work better in the exploit sort of mindset. But the important part is that we're being intentional about it, that we're recognizing that there are two distinct types of work. There is things that we're going to do as part of discovery, and there are things that we're going to do part of delivery. And part of my job each sprint is to consider how much capacity I'm allocating for discovery for delivery. So is it like 30% here and 70% here? And then maybe the next time it changes to 20 and 80. You know, a lot of times I think initially, if this is discovery and this is delivery, it sort of works like this over the life of the project. A lot more discovery in the beginning and eventually starts to build into delivery. And near the end, we're doing a lot less discovery and a lot more delivery. In a nutshell, I think this idea of starting with this sort of business model kind of concept, framing that, deciding really explore, exploit mindset, identifying and mapping those assumptions, and using some of the categories and tools I shared up here, moving the wrong mouse again, to be critical, and then taking a risk-based approach. How comfortable are we with moving forward? Is it high, low? What do we need to do? And now I can sort of move into releases, and now sort of we're kind of back to the beginning, and we're operating in our normal flow, delivering something in the market, and then sort of we start over again. All right, that was a really fast, short version of that. I felt like I was moving a mile a minute. Hopefully we have time for questions. I still have time. Janine, how do you do questions?
Yes, please. Does anybody have any questions for Chris? I can't see everyone, so.
You can also put them in the chat.
True.
Now, I know I didn't explain it that well.
You did
Chris,
it perfectly, Chris.
I think you covered this somewhere, but can you talk again about how you decide that something that's in discovery is ready to be moved into a delivery mode?
To delivery? Yeah, that's a great question. I think it comes down to, and it's really hard. It feels, you feel like kind of a cop-out answer. It really boils down to how risky this thing feels. So sometimes I'll ask some questions like this: what's the impact if we're wrong about this? So if we put this in delivery and we're wrong, what's going to happen? If you're in the exploit model, the delivery piece, it's all about efficiency and measurability and predictability. I mean, that's where companies are like 2-week sprints. How much are we getting done? Velocity, throughput, right? They're hammering that. In those cases, I think there's a lot of risks that become less important. They've sort of already placed the bet. They've sort of already have decided to spend and build and release something. And so there I'm focusing a lot on feasibility. And really it's like, okay, how comfortable are we with building this? Do we have enough information that we can execute and build this reliably and predictably? And if not, what information do I need? If I'm more in the explore mindset, man, then there's a lot of things. And at that point, I'm probably building, before I move into full scale delivery, building to earn or building at scale, I'm probably building out, almost a fully functioning MVP that I have been testing with small groups of people over time. And I'm really comfortable that we've established some product market fit. We've identified a problem that matters. We think we have a solution to that problem. Our evidence is really strong. It appears to be a viable business. And so now we're in a position where we sort of can move this forward. One of the things the challenges I see in organizations is that impacts this or sort of kills this whole idea is around culture. So if culturally, you're working with a company and I was working with a company a year or so ago that, they said they wanted to explore. They said that, man, we need to experiment. We got to change the way we work and think. We're getting killed in the market. We need to develop some new business models. It's like, great, here, let's start identifying our risks and assumptions. Let's figure out what we need to test and learn. And the problem is the business was still sort of expecting something in 6 months that was going to start earning incremental revenue. And the thing I learned is it's okay. People will say they want to test and experiment and they want to learn. But often what goes unsaid is underneath that is that I'm willing to test and experiment and learn as long as you're willing, you can promise you're going to deliver me like $1 million idea. Like, as long as it's a winner, right? I'm good with it. And I kind of feel like that's like saying to my financial advisor, only buy stocks that go up, right? It's really clear. That's all I want you to do. So I think there are some companies that, and I think this is why the explore versus exploit mindset really plays such a huge deal. You need to be clear around what's being expected. In some cases, if I spend 6 months testing and learning and learn that every idea we had was a bad idea and going to be a failure, and we spent, some chunk of money to learn that, some organizations, that wouldn't be considered a win. That would be like an epic failure, because the edict was, we are going to ship something to the market in 6 months. And so if that's the case, understanding that, man, the risk is in not shipping, right? The greatest risk you have is not building and shipping something. And at that point, it's like, well, let's get this thing nailed down as good as we can. Let's throw it in to sprints. Let's work as fast and as efficiently as we can to build and deliver this. Because the biggest risk in that culture is like the failure to deliver, not fear in the marketplace, right? So some companies, I think, would rather fail conventionally than succeed unconventionally. And so I think when you're talking about when do I move something from discovery to delivery, I think you need to know what mindset you're in, where you're at on that spectrum, more explore, more exploit. I think you have to be clear around the impact this assumption has on the product. And if we're wrong, what's going to happen if we drop this into a sprint? So is this like a foundational piece that we're building the rest of the architecture on? And if we're wrong there, like, it's just going to kill us. Or if it's one of those things like, if we're wrong, it probably means we throw it out and we take another sprint and fix it. Maybe the cost is not very much unless there's a lot of schedule pressure and an expectation around delivery. And then I think, you've got to shift focus a little bit. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you.
We have a couple questions in the chat, Chris. I don't know if you can see those.
Oh, yeah, probably can. I think.
Angel.
and Russ. Mhm.
There we go. Okay.
We can read it out for you if you want, Chris.
Oh, I'm reading them now. So,
Okay.
All right. There we go. Okay. Can you give us an example of a company that tried these tools or processes, but it was less than successful outcome? What are your lessons learned? Yeah. So that's the biggest lesson I've had in the last year is that they tried it and they did it, but under the team heard and thought they were operating in the explore mindset. They thought they were attempting to build, identify, and deliver a new business model, right? And so they were more focused on product market fit. They were spending money to gather information, but where the organization was at culturally was measuring them on stories completed, right? Product shipped, features delivered. And that was just a gross mismatch in terms of expectations. They were expecting one thing or measuring against one thing, but sort of saying they wanted another. And I think culturally that's where it becomes challenging. The other piece, like I kind of alluded to earlier, which is if testing and experimenting and learning out something's not a good idea is not culturally okay, I also think that's a real red flag or a problem, right? Most organizations, I don't think, have a way to measure or quantify avoiding a mistake. Hey, we saved $6 million because we didn't drive off a cliff. I just don't think a lot of people sort of see it that way, right? It's really more about, I spent this, what did I get? Well, you didn't get a huge mistake. Like that's a harder thing to eliminate, to do that. So lessons learned, really be clear about the framing the opportunity where you're at on that mindset. Be really clear culturally about what the expectations are. If the bet's already been placed, then man, the number of things I'm worried about from a risk perspective is mostly around feasibility, because that probably impacts my ability to ship and deliver. And I'm probably going to be measured against some burn down or velocity or whatever. And I just want to make sure I'm like can predictably deliver and follow the plan. So the next one in here, what is the result of sprints look like when we are in oscillation mode between discovery and delivery? Does it take 2 sprints to deliver something to production that is of value, or are we now choosing 30, 20? That's a great point. So when I have seen teams operate in this oscillation mode, the team has a discovery backlog. Let's go learn some stuff. So one team, product I was working with last year, the company was building a couple of new mobile apps for consumer products. They had an existing app, but they were really trying to learn and expand and provide homeowners a way to set some goals around energy use and efficiency. And so they built some prototypes. They did some prototypes. They went out, they conducted some interviews. They sort of did this classic thing, call it like a 2-part interview. They asked a lot of questions, and sort of at the end of the question part, they said, hey, so we've given this a little thought. Can we show you this thing? Showed a prototype, got customer feedback on that, took all those learnings and came back, right? So that identified, here's a bunch of beliefs we had. They'll like this, they want this is important, that's important. Turns out when they came back, what they thought was important, wasn't as important. It turned out to be something else. Based on that learnings, they sort of moved into delivery and started building out those pieces, right? And then sort of went back in discovery, took some of those pieces and validated that. So it's a lot of testing and learning. And if it turns out to fail, then you probably don't move on in delivery. That discovery thing stays a little longer. So I drew that sort of more like a sine wave where those things are equal, but I think that the wavelength between the nodes probably is more varied depending on what you're testing and learning and what you're building. So I find that one a lot harder to operate in, unless companies I see doing that are typically B2C companies who are building sort of mobile apps, SaaS products, right? Large customer bases, all software, no hardware, physical device as part of that, and can work sort of more in that way at the early stages of the product, more in the explore mindset. Anybody else?
Anyone?
And I'll make sure Agility gets my slot, the few slides I had, and an export of this drawing. I can export it to a PDF or something, and you guys can have, if you can read my writing, because I was writing crazy fast tonight. The last thing I'll just point out in these slides I put together, there's a couple of pages of resources. Here's some different people I would strongly suggest following or looking into. All great guys, gals. Teresa, if you've not followed her stuff, man, she is amazing. She's amazing, and does she has a lot of virtual sort of classes and stuff around virtual discovery stuff. Super great. There's some books to check out. Would recommend all of those. I mentioned a bunch of tools. Here's a bunch of the tools that we often will reach for and use as part of this process. Like I said, I mentioned Amplitude, John Cutler there at the bottom, North Star Framework, free book you can go out and grab. Really helps in sort of setting that vision and sort of framing that piece and thinking about the 5-year, 3-year, 1 year, 1 month kind of strategy. Just areas that you can sort of explore to find assumptions. So I kind of wrote those out, but if I was going to like sit down with the customer and say, we need to understand what assumptions we've made, I'm just going to sort of a little bit systematically walk through these different things. What's the current situation, business strategy and opportunity? Let's talk about the customer segments. What are their problems, jobs, pains and gains, product, service and offering and features. What's our proposition to those customers? What's the business model look like? How are we reaching those? What's our get, keep, grow strategy? Who's our first customer? How are we getting it to them? What are we doing? And then ultimately, how do we intend to grow? Is it word of mouth? Do we have a sales and marketing team? What's the strategy for continuing to grow? There's my contact information. If you want to reach out, happy to talk about this stuff with you. Hop on a Zoom call. I know it was kind of quick tonight, but happy to hop on a Zoom call and talk about this stuff in more detail. Always happy to share about places I've used it and it's worked, and places I've used it and it's failed. And I've had both. So happy to share and talk about that. I typically, if you've seen me present before, I don't typically talk and share about things I haven't done or as a company we haven't used. And so can generally give you some pretty good examples of either where we're using it or where other organizations and companies in the industry are using those ideas. There's a link there at the end. So SEP does some, I'll say talks or events. Well, a lot of times we'll bring in outside speakers and stuff to share. I think we're looking at April and probably bringing in somebody from the outside, or bringing in nowadays virtually, right? Zooming them in. If you're interested, it's not a big spam list, but we'll just notify you. And I talk at probably 2 or 3 of them a year. So that's there. So.
And you're going to send us the resources, right?
Yes. Yeah. I'll give you all the slides
And the drawing and the slide.
And the drawing. Yep.
Okay. Well, Chris, you're amazing. We're going to thank you so much for coming. Again, so sorry about the problems that we have. We really appreciate it. We love you. Everyone have a good evening. Be safe. And we will see you next month. Thank you, Chris. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks, Jenny. I love doing it.
We appreciate you.
All right. We'll see you.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah. Thank you, Chris. Bye, guys.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, everybody, for your patience.